So Fruits Basket episode 2 has arrived, and it was even better than the first episode, and I loved last week's episode. I thought it was a great introduction to the characters, full of personality and life. The comedy was pretty good, and with this week's episode we get exactly that, but we also get to learn a lot more about this family, and also the drama that kind of resides in it. I really got invested in this week's episode because it really kind of kept that charm of episode 1 that really made me happy, and really just was adorable and cute in a very unique way, but also while diving into these characters so they feel like actual people with their own problems and struggles, while also exploring the Zodiacs and kind of what's going on with these boys. Learning that essentially if they ever get sick or are hugged by the opposite sex, they will turn into their spirit animal, which it will be one of the Chinese Zodiacs. And I thought that was actually really cool. Like, it'd be easy to have something like that just be a gimmick, like, oh, a girl hugs you or whatever, and, you know, you get these kind of cute, fun scenes like we get in this episode, and that's all they do with it. But clearly, there's a lot more at play with this family, and based on some of the characters, such as Yuki, being very kind of worried that essentially Toru would have to be removed because she discovered their secret, and we learned in this episode that something similar happened to him in the past, where basically a large group saw this, and because of the head of the family saying, you know, people will view you as a freak, you won't be able to have friends, you have to keep this a secret, he basically had to lose all of his friends and clearly didn't remake those friendships. So it's pretty interesting seeing just obviously the conflict within this family and how each of them are trying to go about their lives in their own way, while you have someone maybe such as Kyo being very kind of hostile towards someone like Yuki, because for one hand, they do have a pretty bad history in the Zodiac race in terms of kind of the cat getting screwed over by the rat, but also there's probably some personal real issues that are happening in the presence from their past. So it's nice to see that there are these conflicts that obviously will get more and more relevant and probably will pull on our heartstrings down the line. But it's nice that this episode not only was able to keep that same kind of charm that was present in episode 1, but also show us that there are real relationships here and that they are people. They're more than just a guy who can turn into a cat or a rat or a dog, and then they have these kind of fun one-note personalities. No, they're clearly people with their own feelings. And when you see someone like Yuki, who is pretty damn terrified that for the first time there seems to be like he might have another friend. You know, clearly they're trying to force themselves away from this family to some degree, like not going to the all-boys school like the head of the house was, instead going to a school that, yes, does have a lot of females and you have to be extra cautious, but at least you're taking your own steps in life rather than being held down by someone who's trying to kind of put you in a box when you want to leave said box. So it's nice to see that, you know, he's very worried. It kind of seemed to me like he was terrified because really, based on what we've seen so far, it doesn't look like he really has any friends outside of his family, and even some of the people in his family, he has like this hostility kind of relationship formed. So to have someone who clearly isn't scared, isn't worried that you can turn into an animal, not calling you a freak, and kind of proving that maybe what was said to you in the past was incorrect and that there can be people who can form real relationships with you, I quite like that because Toru is a really positive girl and a really genuine girl who isn't in like a very artificial bubble. She really believes that these are good people, and she has this like love for the cat. She wanted to change her year from being the year of the dog to the year of the cat because she felt bad for what happened to the cat in the tale, not being able to get her own year. Even with that said, even though she has this love for cat, she still isn't looking at Yuki as anything lesser or something like that. She sees him as being like, you're my friend, and if something happens, if my memories have to be erased, be sure to make friends with me again. And I think that's really important because it'd be so easy to have that dynamic just feel like a harem relationship, because on the surface level, you can look at this show at a first glance before you watch it and think it would just be a reverse harem, but it's not. It's clearly just a show about relationships, and you see Yuki as someone who's been thirsting for friendship because he can't have friendships, especially ones of the opposite sex. If that happens, he might get hugged or touched and turn into a rat, and based on what the family said is that you'll be viewed as a freak. But clearly Toru is someone who's like, I want to be your friend, and even if my memories have to be erased, be sure to reintroduce yourself to me because you're a good person and I want to be your friend. And I think that's really respectable, and it really makes you believe in these characters and their personalities and their own stories. With Kyo so far being my favorite out of all the cast, outside of Toru obviously, I really like his personality because I really thought he would just be that guy trying to punch Yuki for the entire show, and clearly they're going to have this rivalry, but you can see that he feels very disconnected from this family. I mean, he wasn't even going to school, he was training in the mountains. There's clearly a lot on his plate, and he has a hard time expressing his emotions, and in doing so, he can actually hurt people who are just trying to get close to him. such as Toru. And I love how, like, when Toru is starting to open up more and more to him, I like how he's not just flipping a switch and be like, oh, she loves cats, I'm going to be friends with her or fall in love with her or anything like that. No, it's like he's slowly opening up after this episode, and I think it's a very realistic and gradual pace that over the couple of seasons that this will run, because this is only the first season, we're going to get at least one more to wrap up this entire story. I imagine this will be a 2-cour and then we'll take a break and get another 2-cour, something like that. But it's nice to see that there is this steady buildup and how Toru has always loved cats and how, like, there's a year of a cat, but she's very scared that she's saying the wrong thing and that he's gonna hate her. And I love how he just has such a hard time expressing emotions, especially because he believed there would be no one who would be able to really appreciate him and say, I love you and things like that. But then you have this girl who loves cats, not scared of him or anything, and it's going to be really interesting to see how his relationship is going to evolve with Toru, as so far we already have a great relationship with Yuki and Toru, being this, like, really great friends, and not being able to have friends before, so it'll be interesting to see how Kyo kind of is different from Yuki's relationship with Toru down the line and where that's going to go. And it's going to be fun to see just where this castle go, because right now we have an animal house right now. You know, it's a lot of variety, a lot of kind of bickering, and it really does feel like a family. Like, there's some hardships, but I think there is a love deep down inside. They just got to overcome their own problems, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But the overall comedy in this episode was also really fun. I just love the moments where they just shift and just have these, like, very simplistic, but it's the simplistic beauty that makes the comedy pop so well. And this is probably the first time I've seen an anime where they go about censoring nudity, but they don't do it basic. Like, typically I'd be used to seeing, like, a white bar or something like that, but then they make it so majestic in Fruits Basket where they're, like, glowing these, like, different color auras, and I thought it was just hilarious and a really solid way to get across censoring nudity without it feeling like it was a censor bar or something like that. And I just love it. Like, even though you could easily see how it could grow old, you know, them transforming by mistake, I think with episodes 1 and 2, we're seeing just how that style is going to be more than just a comedy gimmick. There's actually going to be repercussions if something bad happens, and there's actually story mechanics at play. The opening song I have to give major props to. I love this song. It is beautiful. The overall animation for the opening is nothing that special. Like, 90% of it is still frames. But the song is so beautiful and majestic and really just kind of sets the mood for Fruits Basket, you know? It's got this kind of moving atmosphere where you kind of feel like it's beautiful, but it also has this sense of sorrow kind of lingering in the background. And over the course of this episode, we really got a nice kind of arrangement of piano tracks and just really good tracks to make the mood all the more emotional. I think this series is going to be amazing the deeper that we get into this count. It has a style that really works for it. It feels like there's actual care into the personalities and personal stories. And this episode was even better than the first episode, which I thought was a great way to introduce newcomers to this world of Fruits Basket. And walking out of episode 2, I'm just even more excited than I was when I walked out of episode 1. And I really can see this becoming an all-time great once it does get its full adaptation and the quality continues, because this is going to be a full adaptation of Fruits Basket. And based on the production levels so far that we've seen here, and the fact that they're not just going to do it all in one batch, it is just the first season, I think we're going to have a great anime by the time this wraps up. A lot of people last week took what I was saying, that you could look at this series at a first glance and think it's a reverse harem, and they were taking it as me saying, like, I thought it was. No, that's not what I was saying. Like, if you look at the poster image or just kind of look at the character listing, you would think it's a reverse harem. But I never thought it was after episode 1, and even after episode 2, I think it's not a reverse harem. It's just a group of characters that are all going to have their own interesting connections with Toru. I obviously think one of these characters will fall in love with her. It's interesting to see how they can have this dynamic that typically would be a reverse harem, but actually just form real connections and friendships and relationships, be it love to just friendships and families. And I think that's really, really important and respectable. That really makes Fruits Basket into something special. And I think it's going to be really cool just to see how all these characters open up to our main character and how each of their relationships will kind of be different, as so far we've already seen that Yuki and Kyo's are really different from one another, and they have their own feeling and just overall emotional connections that are being formed, and that's important. So when I say it could look like one, it's not me saying that it is, it's me saying that it just appears to be at first glance before you watch it, but once you watch episode 1, and especially after you watch episode 2, it doesn't feel like it. It feels just like a genuine show that's trying to build real emotional connections, and it's really respectable, because most of the time you would expect it'd be a one and done trope and we'd call it a day. But here we're having real emotional connections being formed. there's comedy, and there's this very interesting personality that I can't wait to see where it's gonna go in the future because it's a damn fine series and I know it's gonna be fantastic by the time this first season does wrap up. But for everyone who did watch this week's episode of Fruits Basket, be it manga fans, anime originals like myself, what did you think of just the personal stories, the drama, the comedy? Where do you think it's going to go next week for anime originals? Let me know down in that comment section below. And remember to leave a like if you did enjoy this video and also hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. But until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.